Welcome to Promote Profit Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark, and today it's just me here to talk about a very serious problem going on in the book world and hopefully how you can take precautions to avoid it. Before we get started, I want to remind you to run over to Breakthrough Author Magazine. You can find it at www.breakthroughauthormagazine.com. Our theme for 2024 is Ditch the Middleman, Strategies for Bypassing Book Distribution Fees. So for those of you who don't know, you have to pay the book distributor 55% of the retail price. And once you do that, there's not much profit left in that book for you. So we're really going to do a deep dive in 2024 on how to sell those books without the distributors. And by the way, for those of you of expert businesses, this is an excellent way to build personal relationships as well. So stay tuned, get yourself subscribed. This is the book marketing end of this, not just the platform building, but actually getting your book out there and marketed. So today we're going to talk about piracy in the publishing world. And there's a lot of it going on. Typically up until about 2020 when COVID hit and we started seeing more online corruption or theft. I know recently that I had a little bit of credit card theft. Somebody used one of my credit cards. And when I actually talked to the credit card company, they said they're seeing an enormous amount since COVID, since more people went online. Before that, I actually remember being in New York City back in probably the early 90s down in Chinatown, and there was a place where they were distributing bootleg movies. So in the past, this has been more of something that took place in the movie industry. You've probably seen on almost every TV and movie that you've seen in a very long time. You've seen those warnings at the beginnings. Well, the same thing is true for books now as well. As books have moved online, so has the online scamming. So what do we mean when we talk about privacy or piracy? What we're really talking about is unauthorized distribution, theft of your intellectual property, reproduction of it without your permission. So copying, someone performing it, storage, and basically somebody else selling what is yours and what is your intellectual property. And we have seen a little bit of that in the past in the book industry, in the recent past, besides the overwhelming amount that's happening today. We've seen a little bit of it in the foreign rights area, the scams where people call you and say, we want to produce your book in Russian, and they get paid to do it, and they take your material, and you basically don't have a lot of say over it. So I want to talk about not only that today, but just kind of piracy in the digital age, because there's so much of it. So the first thing that you need to know about this is going through normal distribution channels will help you avoid it a little bit more. I know that Amazon will actually, they scan all the material when it goes in, so they can see if there are duplicates under different names. And I have to tell you, about 3 years ago, someone came to me, they were part of a brand new program where they gave them an ebook to sell the materials, and they wanted to publish the book. And I had to send them back and ask, can you really do that? Because you don't own the rights to that book. And it turned out that the answer from the company who gave it to them was no, they could go to a personal printer and print it for their own personal consumption and to hand out to their clients, but they couldn't publish the book. So the first thing you need to know is understanding what your copyright rules are, and make sure that your book is copyrighted. That is one of the things that can protect you. It used to be, and I know somebody told me this a long time ago, and I said, you can't do that with books. It used to be in the music industry that you could mail your music to yourself or your song, whatever you were writing, and that would be considered copywritten. You can't do that with a book. You need to go onto the government copyright, the Library of Congress copyright, and really do the paperwork and get that certificate. My understanding is if you don't do that and someone steals your work, you're not even going to get looked at in court. Any attorney will tell you, you had to file that paperwork to copyright it. So one way you can avoid some of this copying is to be on platforms that are standard distribution platforms. So that would include Amazon, Apple Books, Google Books, places like that. So make sure when your book is distributed, when you get it published, that you are with distribution platforms that are legitimate. A lot of this happens on platforms that aren't legitimate. Some of the illegal sites that do this are what we call phishing sites, and you've probably heard that because there's a lot of email phishing that's going on right now. People that have direct out downloads, and also something called torrents. So there are a lot of advances in the industry, but you need to be able to, first of all, understand the publishing platforms that are out there. So there are three main ways to get your book published. The ebook stores, which I just mentioned, three that are fabulous. Subscription services, which are probably a little bit more towards the, I would say, like Audible. Audible would be something. I have a subscription with Audible. I'm not even sure you can go and just randomly buy a book there, but I have a subscription. So every month I can choose so many books from there. Or the print on demand. So these are all different business models, and they'll enable customers to find you easier in legitimate ways. So that's one way, understanding the publishing when you publish your book is a great way to protect yourself from ending up on platforms where piracy isn't completely legal. So even with those business models, though, there is some piracy that remains. So if you think about those different business models, it's probably fairly easy on a subscription service like Audible to record and distribute and have that book distributed on a non-legal platform. That's exactly what happened when I saw the movie, the bootlegged movie in New York City, as we actually bought one. And then when we got it home, we stuck it in the VCR, and you could tell that someone was actually in the movie theater, and it was this little bitty screen. And they were actually taping it while they watched the movie and then reselling it. And I would imagine with something like Audible, that would be very, very easy. Now, I'm not saying Audible's bad. I love Audible. But you can see there would be, I could actually see you listening on one computer and recording on another. So it would be really easy to pirate that way. Some places where piracy goes on that you can avoid and make sure that your books are not on there are file hosters, torrents, blogs. Sometimes people will steal the material and put it on blogs, especially if it's something like poetry or short stories. Streaming platforms, it'd be really easy to get on YouTube and read somebody else's book or create something around somebody else's book. Maybe even make a video like I'm doing right now. This is not only a podcast, but it's a video. So it would be really easy to get on there and do something that violates the copyright of that book. E-commerce. That's where so much of this is happening today. The piracy is, the counterfeiting that goes on eBay. And I have to tell you guys, I've actually bought things on eBay that I didn't understand at first, that I was buying copyrighted material. But here's what happened. I went over and I looked over thinking I could get somebody's book cheaper on eBay. What I actually got was a downloaded program. So in that case, it was something that someone had put together. It was one of those programs that are a do-it-yourself. Someone downloaded it, and then after they finished with it, they uploaded it and resold it themselves. And I have to tell you, there's a pretty significant amount of stuff I bought before I realized what was going on there. So again, you have to watch that your book doesn't end up over on eBay, that your materials, let's say you go and you create a course, that doesn't end up on eBay. So you need to be a little bit vigilant about what's over there and what's being sold, because I will tell you, I got those programs for like $50. And there were a couple of them that I got that significantly those people were selling for, $3,000-$4,000 when I actually went and looked online. When somebody brought it to my attention, that was what was going on. And then phishing sites go and they hijack your traffic. And they can also be a way that, maybe they grab onto your audience. We just had something happen on a live stream back in, I believe it was August, where there was a new AI software that was supposed to be listening. It was like those ones that, show up at the Zoom meeting before in the recording. That's another way your stuff can be pirated. And we actually had one that interfered with the Zoom recording of the program. And when we went and looked up online what it was, we went back to the person who attended the event and said, hey, this says online that this particular program can send out emails to your audience. Somehow it gets into your email. So you have to be really careful what you use out there, because you could be accidentally pirating somebody else's information. As a matter of fact, I recorded a podcast last week, and the person that I was interviewing forgot to turn her, I think she had Fathom. She forgot to turn it off. And so I had to ask her and say, hey, this is my copyrighted material. Could you please turn that off before we get going? And she wasn't trying to do anything. She has it there to take notes, which I think that's what most people use that sort of software for on Zoom. But you have to be careful if you're creating Zoom classes that people aren't copying your work. Because there's a lot of that out there that happens. So I guess, why do people pirate? I mean, of course, it's to make money. But they do it because there's a lack of money available. They do it because they don't have a credit card available to buy the material. They're not willing to purchase content when they get it for free. And we just had a discussion about that in one of our group programs that I'm a part of. That, you turn on something like Fathom, or you have a friend do it, and all of a sudden you and all of your friends are taking the same class that only one of you has paid for. They're not willing to buy a subscription or upgrade. That's when you can get into trouble as well. They're not happy with their own content offering. So this happens a lot with courses that get pirated. And remember, a lot of you are creating courses from your book. So that's when the Fathom shows up, or one of those programs that can record what you're doing. Of course, too, you always have that. I know people in my programs, we actually record. So, using that information or selling that information. And I don't feel like any of my clients would ever do that, but you just never know when it's going to happen. And then when the content isn't available on legal channels. So, you can find your stuff on the dark web sometimes. For those of you who have credit monitoring, you probably every once in a while will get an alert that says somebody has your email, or somebody has a password. It's the same kind of thing. There's been phishing happen. They've pirated something. They're trying to get in and steal your information. So you're probably wondering, okay, they've stolen my information. What are they going to do with it? How are they going to monetize it? Well, one of the biggest things is ad revenue. I've actually got or seen ads where I click on and I know that ad's not going to the person that I know that's selling that material. This happens a lot on places like Facebook and Google, where you create an ad and you sell something that's not yours. Downloads, so affiliates, memberships, phishing scams. I want to go back for a minute to memberships, because I see this a lot. People who have membership sites, especially if they're based on your book, make sure that you're dripping your content, because I don't know how many times I've heard that, there's this whole library of content if you subscribe, and people will subscribe for 1 month. They'll download all your content and then they'll cancel. So they've gotten everything that they should have gotten over a year-long subscription. So be sure when you put that together, especially if it's based on the material in your book, that you drip that content. You only let so much out a month. And I think we're seeing that more and more with the subscription models that are out there. And then the phishing scams. The phishing scams are everywhere these days. I can't tell you how many times I get an invoice and I look at it before I open it. And most of the time I don't open it, and it'll say it's an invoice. And I'll look at who it's from. You can click on that email. I get this a lot with Microsoft. It'll tell me I need to change my password. And then I'll click on the actual email and see it's like Joe's Garage, down on 5th Street or something. Well, Microsoft is not going to send you a password reset from something like that. So you do have to be really careful. Here's another thing you have to be really careful about out there is catfishing. I've seen so much catfishing lately, and I've been talking to a lot of people about it, where, if you're on a dating app, I know this doesn't apply to books, but if you're on a dating app or something, somebody will want to get your email right away, and then they'll threaten you, or they'll send you nude pictures and then say that, they're going to tell everyone you're, looking at nude pictures, pornography, or underage or something like that. So you need to be careful with all of those phishing scams, because sometimes it's just not phishing to get passwords. Sometimes it's more devious than that and can be really, really bad stuff. So you have to be really careful with all of that stuff. So next thing, is how does this affect you? How does this affect publishers? It doesn't just affect publishers, because authors get their royalties from the publishers. So if there's free material out there, both of you are not getting paid in most cases. So most people, before they buy the book, they look around and they see if they can get it for free someplace. So unless you're doing some sort of free book on Amazon, you may not be safe. You can enroll in the KDP program if you don't have your book in multiple places, and you can give your book away for free for 5 days. This is especially good for fiction books. I can tell you, back when I used to write fiction, I made a lot of money off that. I had a bestseller from a KDP 5-day free that just took off, and I had tremendous book sales after that because people started noticing, they bought it. That was where I made over 25K on that one particular fiction novel. So don't use free services unless they're legit. And I would actually say the only free site I know out there that is legit is Amazon. But even so, if you have your information, let's say you have it on your website, they have little, I forget what they're called, like octopus arms that go out to see if there are other areas where that book is, so they check. Also, the best-selling, search for your best-selling titles on places like Google. I know when I look on Google, I have pages and pages of books. Check and look at those books and see, how are they selling your books? Are they legitimate bookstores, or are they websites that may be downloading it and selling it at a discount? So always be, do that every once in a while. Check every couple of months. Go Google yourself, or go Google your book, and look at all the places on there that sell. A lot of them are legitimate. They're mom and pop bookstores, and they're saying, hey, we have the book, but look at the pricing, look to see if it's free, look to see if it's discounted, and if it's discounted less than 55%, because chances are a lot of those on there are not legitimate sales of your book. There's also the author relations. So you can't totally prevent all this, but make sure that you do have access to your publisher if you find something, because they can really give you the skinny on what's going on when they look at it. And sometimes they can go back to the distributors, or, they know how to look at these things. Doesn't mean they're always going to catch people. In fact, I would say we rarely catch people doing that. Recently had a conversation with someone in the law enforcement arena about some of these piracy issues, and they legitimately told me most of them go back to Russians. So there's a good chance you're not going to get your money back, but you might be able to get a site shut down. A few things to consider about all this. So, your legal costs, what is the impact to your brand, and will things like that diminish your customer loyalty? A lot of times I will say, not only to avoid the 55%, but to avoid piracy, I would sell your book right on your own site. That will give you connection to your customers and also the chance to build a relationship and cut down on that piracy, because they're going to be paying through a secure pay portal. You will have an email, you will have an address, you will have a name. You can, do a one-time only offer and give them something free with it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, everything is secure. So, some examples of piracy in publishing that you're going to see, the search engines, they're full of illegal links. Again, like I said, go Google and look at all the links and see what's going on the searching engines. I would say Google is probably the biggest, just because it is the biggest search engine. So probably start there with the search engines. You can also be concerned when you find phishing links in your email. So if there are inquiries about your book, if there's anything like that, make sure that you are looking there and look before you open, because some of the stuff has viruses in it as well. eBay, check eBay frequently, because you can find your authors, your downloads on there. And what happens is, it's not just the book, because anybody can resell a book. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there is sort of something wrong with it, but not as bad as the download problem. And again, with your courses as well, because like I said, I've bought a couple courses online before I realized what was going on and didn't understand. Also, understand the data you need to litigate this. So you need your copyright certificates, you need stuff like that to be able to do it. So Ingram is offering, and most of you are published through Ingram. They don't necessarily have it on Amazon. I'm not really sure about that, but I know Ingram, Lightning Source, the distribution channels that we personally use have a product called Link Busters that offer industry-leading anti-piracy solutions for publishers. So make sure when you hire a publisher that you're hiring somebody that has access to something like that, because you want to protect your intellectual property as much as humanly possible. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. I know there was probably a lot of information, but you need to know what's going on and how you can minimize this for your intellectual property. All of you guys have great ideas. You have things that need to be protected, but you also need to be aware of how to protect yourself in the process. And if you're protecting yourself in this area too, protect your financial areas as well. I mean, I know personally, and I'm not making any money from this, I have the FICO app. And the FICO app tells me everything. It's up to the minute dates or up to the minute FICO scores. It tells you when things have gone down, when things have gone up. You can see who's accessing your account. So it doesn't hurt in this day and age to have something like that where you can check, or you can be notified. There are a lot of programs out there that will notify you when there are financial changes. It probably doesn't hurt to get those, especially based on what I told you about. I had a conversation with one of my credit card companies. Someone used my credit card for TikTok. I don't even use TikTok. I have strong feelings about why I don't use it. And so when I saw that on my credit card, I had a conversation with them, and the woman who was in their fraud department related that since COVID, they've had an extraordinary amount of fraud, and you don't ever want that to happen to you. It's really a pain. So I hope that was really helpful. You guys hit the reply button, or, go over on YouTube and watch this and comment on it. I hope that all of you protect everything you've done, because you deserve to have the best publishing journey possible. Thank you. See you next week.